Hello everyone, this is Fan from Awesome Tech Gaming Pro. I hope you all are well. Today I'm going to talk about the 3 TV. You see the X90J on the bottom side, and the bottom right TV is Sony X85J, and the top side TV is Samsung Q80T. The Sony X90J and the Sony X85J are very similar overall. The X90J has a full array local dimming feature that can improve contrast and reduce blooming in dark scenes. But the X85J has better native contrast and flicker-free backlight. It's a direct LED VIA panel, X85J. But X90J is a full array local dimming TV. The X90J is brighter in HDR and HDR content displays at the correct brightness. If you care about calibrating your display for the most accurate image possible, one important difference here is that the X85J doesn't have a color management system. And X90J and the Samsung Q80T QLED are similar. They both have a VIA panel with a 120 Hz refresh rate. The Sony has a better contrast ratio than the Samsung, although that's mainly because the Samsung has the ultra viewing angle layer, which improves viewing angles at the cost of contrast. The Sony gets brighter in SDR and HDR, but it doesn't handle reflections as well as the Samsung. The Samsung has a wider color gamut, faster response times, and lower input lag. It supports freezing VRR to reduce screen tearing when gaming, whereas the Sony doesn't support freezing. The X85J variant, which is a VA panel and does not come with any dimming zones. The peak brightness of the X85J is about 500 nits or close to 550 nits. This TV sustained brightness of about 400 nits, the X85J. This makes a TV a lot brighter than the X80J, but not as bright as the X90J. The TV has a 4K resolution with support for popular HDR formats, including Dolby Vision, HDR10, and HLG under the hood. X85J has Sony's 4K HDR-X1 processor, the same found on the X80J. The real-world testing, you see the standard slew of contents on this X85J TV and realize that the panel is actually quite bright for content consumption. Even without local dimming, the contrast on the TV was good to ensure minimal blooming when consuming content in a pitch dark room. You can put simply the content consumption experience of this TV was better than the X80J in a dark room, but fell a tad short when compared to the X90J, putting the performance of this TV smack bang in the middle of the other two Sony TVs. In a tour like Our Planet, which plays in Dolby Vision, some great colors and bright highlights when consuming content. Even dark sequence details in a show like Altered Carbon, another one in Dolby Vision. I got very good dark scene performance without loss in details. For both these shows, despite the lighting in the room, I left it on the Dolby Vision Bright preset for the best experience. The standard preset when watching, it produces very good colors and brightness, albeit with a slightly cool color temperature. Switching to the cinema preset made the content look slightly better with a warm tone, but reduced the brightness when switched to the auto brightness of the TV off. The brightness was as good as the standard preset with good color reproduction and a slightly warm color temperature, which is more accurate. With some biased lighting in the room, content consumption was good with almost no blooming in dark sequences. While there was some slight blooming in dark sequences in a pitch dark room, it was immediately eliminated with some biased lighting. Once again, just like the X80J, the standard preset of the TV got the job done very well for HDR content consumption. The X85J makes the content look rich, skin tones, naturals, and colors pop. In a movie like Spider-Man Homecoming, the reds and blues of Spider-Man's suit look crisp, and the web design in it looks well defined. The same for Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, where I have a desired bike chase sequence. The skin tones look natural, and while the cinema preset makes things slightly warmer and pleasing to the enthusiast, the mastering of the standard preset works so well that you would be okay leaving it on the standard for almost all forms of content. If you see the X85J gaming performance, it has two HDMI 2.1 ports. I get access to 4K 120 Hz. Sadly, like the X90J, the X85J doesn't support 4K 120 Hz chroma 4:4:4, but X90J support chroma 4:4:4 on 4K 120 Hz. That's why the text will be very clear on X90J, but X85J, it is a little bit blurry. X900H also has this problem. Now, on the other hand, if you see the Samsung Q80T, definitely Q80T is better than the X85J, no doubt. It's 4K HDR performance that steals all the headlines in TV review. But that's not entirely the case, thanks to the SHARE's Ultra HD Quantum Image processor, which has trickled down from Samsung's 8K flagships and some new AI smarts. The Q80T's performance with HD HDR content is a real showstopper. The TV is able to interpolate subtle elements of detail into HD and lower resolution content, creating a compelling ultra high HD style image. The processor works out what is native detail and then through comparison with a texture database creates more of the same. The HDR picture modes comprise standard, dynamic, natural, and movie. Standard and natural work with most content types, with the latter having the edge in brighter viewing rooms, where its tendency to crush black level detail in order to enhance contrast is less obvious. The dynamic mode leads to quite oversaturated images, though while movie basically does the exact opposite. If you don't want to faff around in menus and can't persuade other household members to manipulate image presets, there's an updated version of the brand's intelligent mode with adaptive brightness and adaptive sound that will make the most of incoming content. Motion handling is above average on Q80T, so this is a good screen for lovers of sport. Automotion Plus settings can be manually configured with adjustable blur and judder reduction. If you don't want things to look overly processed, keep blur reduction low and judder reduction at around 4. Alternatively, leave the system on auto. Of course, you really want to let the Q80T's 4K quantum processor of the chain feed it some native Ultra HD. It boasts a raft of technologies able to maximize color, detail, and specular highlights. Although it's tempting to compare the Q80T with the 2090's Q80R, this model is actually an update on 2090's Q70R. The Q80T shares the same number of backlight zones as the Q70R, around 50. This puts it some way behind full array local dimming flagships, but it's still good enough to offer more HDR precision when compared to edge-lit screens, while maintaining all decent screen uniformity. For the most part, you won't notice screen blooming, except on dark scenes with bright highlights. More often than not, the giveaway is black letterbox bars with movies. When something bright moves into the space just above or below the picture area, you will see some light pollution, but the effect is relatively fleeting. The SHARE's overall HDR performance is strong too. I measured peak brightness just under 900 CD per meter square using a 10% HDR window. This range covers most commercially produced HDR content and presents bright highlights that add sparkle and depth to images. Infuriatingly, though there's no support for Dolby Vision, Samsung maintains it doesn't need it, although its reticence to embrace what is universal dynamic metadata standard appears more political than practical. On the plus side, there is provision for HDR10 Plus used by Amazon Prime in place of Dolby Vision, as well as a static HDR10 and broadcast standard HLG. The Q80T looks fairly conservative. It actually boasts a rather radical sound system rather than just relying on downward firing stereo drivers. Samsung's designers have added a second pair at the top left and right of the display. So let's talk about the Sony X90J. I like the Sony X90J color algorithm. Its colors and highlights look absolutely gorgeous here. The TV does an incredible job taking HD content and upscaling to 4K and native 4K HDR content, especially those shot in Dolby Vision, look exceptionally beautiful. Again, that's no surprise because I felt the exact same way about the X90J's predecessor, the Sony X900H. So what's changed in the picture quality department? Well, the latest edition on X90J is the new cognitive processor XR that adds more depth to some scenes, especially to older content shot in HD and better contrast control. Let's start first with the cognitive processor XR. What it does differently is that it can divide up a scene into several parts and then can figure out what the focal point is. If the processor sees a bright neon sign, it knows to boost the brightness and clarity of that sign. If it identifies a person, it works to enhance their skin tone and any fine details like hair or wrinkles. This happens instantly on a frame-by-frame basis, all behind the scenes. As for the enhanced contrast control, well, that comes down to the way the processor works with the full array panel and an integrated light sensor. In a briefing with the last year, Sony said that the TV has a technology called XR Contrast Booster 5 that helps boost bright areas and lower the black levels in the same scenes. Plus, it retains the contrast regardless of what the lighting conditions are in the room, thanks to the ambient light sensor. Now, that being said, regardless of how bright it was in the room, under no circumstances does the Sony X90J ever reach the same brightness levels as Samsung's QLED TVs like the Samsung Q90A that actually very good mini LED backlight. That means direct light can be a real problem. If you are someone who has a TV right in front of an open window, you will likely see some glare which will reduce some of the contrast. That's doubtly true if you look at the screen off-axis, as the X90J struggles with limited viewing angles. It's not as bad as, say, the Vizio V series, which loses a ton of color saturation when you are just 30 degrees left or right of the TV. But it is noticeable the farther off-axis you sit. The good news is that sitting straight on, the TV looks phenomenal with no major issues, even when it's set to the standard picture mode. Out of the box, picture is nicely saturated and doesn't suffer from any picture defects or motion artifacting. Switching to another mode will give you a different color tone and or motion processing setting, which is nice if you want even a smoother control of watching sports. But most times you will be just fine with standard or custom with a few tweaked settings. So let's say pot, which TV you like most, Samsung Q80T or Sony X85J or Sony X90J? Please write in the comments below. That's it from now. If you like this video, please subscribe and press the bell icon for future notifications update. Thanks for watching.
To change up.